Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar. This is the first webinar for new center here at the Weekly School of Communication and Information at NTU, the Center for Information Integrity and the Internet, or what we call InCube. We have an interesting and also very important topic today, and we have speakers who will be sharing research and work that they've been doing in this area. Of course, InCube will be sharing results from our survey that will be done by Dr. Tang Hao Go. And also we have Associate Professor Jason Cabanes from the Salle University in the Philippines, who's been doing a lot of great work on mobile intimacies. And we have our very own group of students from the Weekly School who are working on a really interesting and also very important final year project, and we'll be learning about their project in a while. So we've lined up three great presentations this afternoon for you. But before that, let me share briefly about our new center, which is the Center for Information Integrity and the Internet, or InCube. Our goal, which we were established I think several months ago, formally launched in January. Our goal is to help promote information integrity in online spaces through rigorous, relevant, and timely research. And we will be launching our official website in March, so please stay tuned for that. Here are some of the core themes that we track. We hope to track. We've started our first national survey in December, and we hope to survey the same set of people every quarter and the next several years. Some of the key indicators that we're tracking include media use, device use, and their impact on digital well-being. We're also interested in the problem of fake news and also generally in trust and information quality online. And so we're doing quarterly panel surveys, but we also do thematic questions. In our first survey, we ask questions about COVID-19, about what people believe and do in terms of, say, precautions that they engage in, but also people's outlook as we head into the new normal. So we're very Singapore-centric in our focus, but we want to have to get research findings that have global implications. We are an interdisciplinary team. The overall team for InCube is composed of people from Weekly and also from other schools. We have a member from from the School of Computer Science and Engineering, from the School of Social Sciences, from the Nanyang Business School, and also from the RSIS. So the core team of InCube is interdisciplinary, and also we partner with the Misinformation and Information Studies Research Cluster at the Weekly School, where here are some of the members of our cluster. And so that's InCube in a nutshell. And now I will introduce our first speaker for this afternoon. There we go. Our first speaker this afternoon, who will provide us a macro overview of the phenomenon of intimacy online and the different forms of intimacies. Our first speaker is Associate Professor Jason Cabanes from the Salle University in the Philippines, who's a good friend and also one of the most prolific researchers I know. He is currently the associate editor of Communication, Culture, and Critique, and also the vice chair of, I'm blanking out, which division is that, Jason, from ICA?
Ethnicity and race information.
Yes, ethnicity and race. Yeah, and he's been doing a lot of amazing research. He just finished co-editing a book, which is very much related to the topic that we will be discussing this afternoon. So, Jason?
Okay. I think the current share screen needs to be stopped.
Okay.
So that I can...
Okay, let's make sure that he is a co-host. So can you try doing it? Oh, I need to stop sharing my screen. That's why. Okay.
So I hope everyone can see what I'm screen sharing right now.
Yes.
So first of all, I want to thank InCube for inviting me to this very interesting webinar. I had a preview yesterday of the other talks lined up today, and I thought they were all very exciting. So for my bit, what I wanted to do was to give a bit of an overview of mobile mediated intimacies in the context of our current pandemic. Um, so I want to begin by talking about the case of Lara, okay, a 30-year-old professional currently living by herself in a tower flat here in the Philippines capital of Metro Manila. From March to August last year, uh, this COVID-19 hotspot region went into a strict lockdown, and we're still in a lockdown of sorts even up until now. But at that early point, Lara suddenly found herself cut off from her loved ones. During that time, her lifeline to her family and her partner, all of whom were living outside the capital, was digital media communication. In one of our chats, Lara said, I guess this is how it feels like to be an overseas Filipino worker or an OFW. Only, unlike those who go abroad, I didn't have the time to psych myself and accept that this is going to be my life for the next few months. So, as Lara astutely pointed out, COVID 19 has foisted on many of us a key feature of the life that many migrants are familiar with. Like them, we have had to endure a prolonged physical separation from our intimate partners, relatives, friends, community groups, and other close relations. Together with this, the pandemic has also intensified our experience of what many migrants do to mitigate the challenges of being far away from their loved ones. And that is to use digital media both to sustain old ties and to forge new ones as well. Now, whilst COVID 19 has amplified the mainstreaming of the migrant experience of having mediated relationships, the increasing centrality of mobile technologies in our intimate lives has been underway for quite some time now. In Mobile Media and Social Intimacies in Asia, a book that um, I co edited, us contributing authors showcase how mobile technologies have become entwined with the lives of people across East and Southeast Asia. And in fact, in the book, we do have some chapters on the Singaporean case as well. The chapters talk about social media apps like Facebook and Instagram, messaging apps like KakaoTalk and Line, and dating apps like Tinder and Blue, and their role in the continual transformation of romantic, family, and community intimacies in the region. It needs to be said, however, that despite the growing ubiquity of mobile technologies in Asia, its spread has been very uneven. All in the same region will find digital contexts that are deprived. So think of the many rural areas that are advertised as free from the stresses of our online lives, which only means they don't have enough internet access. Digital contexts that are good enough. Think of the barely passable internet access that we have here in Metro Manila, for example, in the Philippines. Uh, just to actually share, this morning, my Wi-Fi conked out. I'm using a pocket Wi-Fi device today, and I hope I don't get disconnected until the end of this talk. But that's how it's normal in Manila for this to happen. And then it'll take another month for it to be repaired. But you also have digital contexts that we can call information societies, which you have in Singapore, for instance. So this means that the possibilities and challenges for enacting particular kinds of mobile mediated relationships tend to vary widely, depending on the digital contexts in which people find themselves. So here in the Philippines, for example, the different levels of community quarantine in place across the country means that many of our interactions now happen in text messages, phone calls, and social messaging apps. But for those who have more privileged internet access, There's also an extra world of TikTok, of Zoom, and yes, even Nintendo's Animal Crossing. It's therefore urgent for us to think about what the implications are of the centrality of mobile mediated relationships in our pandemic lives and in the new normal that's presently taking shape. To frame my exploration of mobile media intimacies in the context of COVID 19, I want to use the concept of local intimacies, which I developed together with my collaborator, Dr. Leo Oitioko. So, in our book, which you can see here, and if you want more information about the book, I've put a QR code that you can scan and access. So, local intimacies refers to how mobile technologies have both normalized and intensified people's experiences of being entangled in two things. One is the homogenizing force of global modernity, and the other is the diversifying forces of local everyday life. On one hand, local intimacies builds on Roland Robertson's notion of glocalization, in that it emphasizes, and I quote, the simultaneity and interpenetration of what are conventionally called global and local, or in more general vein, the universal and the particular, close quote. It highlights how this dynamic of simultaneity and interpenetration manifests in mobile mediated relationships. On the other hand, the concept also seeks to nuance Robertson's thesis in the context of East and Southeast Asia. It posits that what we define as local emerges from the region's negotiations with global forces, both from its colonial past and its neo or post colonial present, something that I think the Philippines and Singapore share, being both post colonial countries. Now, mobile media have normalized these local intimacies because of their portability and their availability. People across Asia literally carry the tensions between the globality and locality of their intimate relationships in their pocket. Mobile media have also intensified local intimacies because of how these technologies are all at once the most personal and individual, um, but also the most social and global of communication technologies. So even in people's most private one-to-one mobile communication, they are still caught up in the broader social frictions between globality and sociality. So in the remainder of my talk, I'm very conscious of the time, so I'll be very brief. I want to argue 2 points through a couple of cases. One point is that indeed mobile media have allowed us to explore new kinds of intimacies, and especially in the context of our different experiences of lockdown. In this slide, for instance, you can see a screenshot of a recent ad that TikTok released for the Philippines market last Christmas. It featured a granddaughter who was dearly missing her grandfather who had recently passed away. The ad was all about how the granddaughter reminisced their good times through the many TikTok videos that they had created and shared. But it was also about how such familial intimacies that are deeply personal and local can now be very public and global through TikTok, of course. They have become, in short, local intimacies. My second point, however, is that no matter how newfangled these mobile mediated intimacies are, the virtual connections they create are fraught. And ultimately, they are not enough to fulfill our deep and complex needs for human sociality. So the first case I want to talk about is that of quarantine zone romances, and I'm not sure how many of you are familiar of this concept. It's a mix of friend zone and quarantine. So you are only in a relationship with someone uh, during moments of strict lockdown, and that relationship ends once the lockdown ends as well. So in discussing this phenomenon, I want to show how we cannot understand mobile media intimacies apart from the realities of everyday life. And I think that's something that the other people presenting today will talk about, that they're still connected to the many problems that we have about, for example, gender and sexuality, right? So, uh, Korean zoning is often premised on a middle class cosmopolitan lifestyle. And in a country like the Philippines, for example, people talk about this as if everyone can do it. They talk about it particularly in magazines that are geared towards the middle class, new kinds of romance. But just imagine the challenge of quarantine zoning in a house where you live with your parents, which is typical for an Asian household, or even grandparents and siblings and extended family, right? Or where you and your family, which happens in the Philippines, share a mobile phone, just one mobile phone for everyone, or a limited prepaid internet data plan. So all of these everyday realities will creep into your attempts at doing a quarantine romance. Also, imagine the challenge of quarantining if this intimacy is seen as problematic by those people who are around you. For example, the Philippines is a very conservative Catholic country, and so these kinds of romances that don't end up towards marriage are frowned upon. The other case I wanted to talk about is that of lockdown long distance relationships or lockdown LDRs. This pertains to couples suddenly finding themselves quote unquote separated because of quarantine. Lara, this is exactly what she is going through. Uh, and in fact, maybe some of you are familiar with Jollibee, the burger chain, because it now has a couple of branches in Singapore, right? Um, they came out with an ad about lockdown LDRs and how that can be mitigated by ordering Jollibee delivery. But anyway, using such a case, I want to emphasize how virtual intimacies tend to reduce our relationships to the bare minimum. Of course, at the very least, having lockdown LDRs allow us to be present to each other through perpetual contact. We always feel that we are in touch because we're just a mobile text away or a mobile chat away. And through ambient co-presence, you always feel that people are just around you. You're connected constantly via the mobile phone in your pocket and all the apps that you can use to communicate with them. But then again, um, this is moderated by not only one's mobile media access. Not everyone can actually do this, uh, but one's dependence on this access as well. In the context of the Philippines, for instance, the irony is that the people who need mobile phones the most are the ones who have no other way to access other people. Like during a quarantine, for instance, just a slight critique of our upper class, they are least dependent on the quality of mobile phones because because of their social privilege, they can subvert the rules and still meet up with people because they have ways of doing that. Um, but more than that, the seemingly boring serendipities that constitute human bonding are lost if we're doing our relationships purely online. You know, a funny story brought up during a meal, a ready shoulder to cry on during a moment of loneliness, the excitement of a suddenly scheduled meetup between you and a partner. So all of this tends to disappear. So devoid of this serendipitous, lockdown LDRs can become very functional. The challenge is heightened as well because unlike migrants who do LDRs, lockdown LDR couples did not themselves necessarily make the decision to separate. And so they did not also necessarily have the time to psychologically prepare for this, for the new normal. You're just foisted into this. Um, so I want to close my talk oops, by saying that perhaps our pre-pandemic fears about mobile-mediated intimacies actually had it the other way around. Before all this happened, our fear was that virtual relationships would supplant our everyday lives. But if anything, these days of lockdown have shown us that what should really concern us is that our local intimacies, despite the new experiences of intimacy they afford us, they cannot escape from the frictions between Western aspirations for global modernity and the persistent realities of local everyday life. So all the challenges to intimacy including issues of abuse, which will be part of the discussions later on, they still are part of these mobile mediated intimacies, and at times uh, they get amplified as well. So I'll stop here, and I'm excited to hear the other talks and to have a conversation with the others in attendance. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Chase. If you have questions about what he shared with us, please note that down. We will take all of your questions after all the presentations are done. So we will make sure that we have enough time for questions or comments or suggestions. So thanks, Jason. Dr. Cabanes talked about the general idea of mediated different types of intimacies and how they are mediated, right? So now we will focus on a specific type of mediated intimacy, a specific type of use, which would be the use of online dating apps in Singapore, which is one of the themes that we asked in our center's first national survey. So to share about the findings from our study is Dr. Chang Hao Go. Chang Hao?
Okay, hello everyone. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, so today I'm going to share with you the survey that we have done last year. So it is a it's something regarding online dating apps in Singapore. So to give you an overview of the study, the set of data that you are looking at now is actually a part of a larger set of data that we have collected last year. We actually have 1,600 survey respondents, but our aim is actually not to investigate dating apps, but actually to look at the new normal in Singapore. Yeah. So we actually have a total of 571 respondents that are all dating app users. So it's not a very big data here. So as you can see, most of the respondents here are actually Singapore citizens, and most of them are actually male, and then they earn between 4,000. Most of them earn between 4,000 to less than 10,000. And the interesting part is that most of the respondents here are actually married. Yeah. So married and single. So as you can see from our survey findings, from our data, the users of dating apps are people who are not only single, but they're also married. Yep. Okay, very interesting. Okay, so we actually have a question in our data. So we actually asked them, compared to pre-COVID-19, my use of the following, which is dating app, has either decreased, no change, or increased. So most of them actually indicated that their use of dating app actually increased. So we want to know who actually, is there in terms of male and female, who actually uses dating app more. So as you can see, there's almost an equal percentage of men and women actually use their dating app. So yeah. So for people who actually, for male, actually there is a 47.1% and female 46.7%. Okay, so so we want to know who these men and women are. So we make use of our available variables that we have in the data set. And then we found out that, people who say that their use of dating app increases, right? Most of them are actually single and married individuals. Okay. Yeah. So we want to know married individuals or attached individuals. Do they how satisfied are they with their spouses and romantic partners? So we want to know, like, is there anything we can infer from the data set? So we actually found that among for those people who don't use dating apps, right? There are more people who are satisfied compared to users of a dating app. So So in other words, we may question that is it true that dating app users are actually not satisfied with their spouses or romantic partner, which actually drive them to use dating apps. So at this point we can't confirm anything. Yeah, but we are open to discussion later. Yeah, and then okay, so we actually want to know whether if those people who actually um, increase their use of dating app, right, do they actually feel lonely? So we actually did a comparison between the three groups, people who say their dating app actually decreased, no change, or increased. So we can see that people who say that their the use of their dating app actually increased, right? They have highest level of a loneliness score. So again, this is just a comparison. We can't actually say that loneliness actually leads to the increase of use of a dating app. Yeah, we need to look at it further. Yeah. So okay. So because we are working we are actually researching on the internet. So this is something additional. So we actually look at the correlation between the increase of the use of dating app and the perception of the quality of online information. So we actually found a positive, significant correlation between people's perception of the quality of the online information and their their increase in the use of dating app. So so at this point, we also can't determine whether if there is actually a causation, but I mean, we can actually look at it yeah, in different ways. For example, maybe we can say that the increase in, I mean, when there's a positive perception of the quality of information online, say that we think that the information is actually of good quality, is useful, is reliable, is something aligned with my moral values, and therefore which actually drives me to use dating apps, yeah, or vice versa. Yeah, so at this point we also can't really confirm whether if one actually causes the other. Yeah. So yeah, that is my. I think we have come to the end. So if you have any questions, yeah, please feel free to email us. Yep. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chang Hao. So yeah, those are some of our findings from InCube. Very exploratory, and we were actually just curious. I mean, we were reflecting on the different aspects of internet use, and you know it the use of dating apps is one type of using the internet. So we included those questions. And as Chang Hao also noted, some of those relationships that he shared with you are mostly correlational, so we don't really know which one is predicting which one. For example, you're looking at the relationship between feeling lonely or feeling that you lack companionship, and then whether you've increased your use of dating apps during the COVID-19 pandemic. We find a relationship there, but we don't know which one is really driving which one, right? So that's what we hope to look into when we conduct our second panel survey. So at least we have some time order there. So it's possible that the people who feel lonely because of social isolation during the pandemic are increasing their use of dating apps to manage that negative feeling. But it's another possibility is those who are more active on dating apps during this period are experiencing more loneliness because of what happens during their interactions with people in this online dating spaces, right? So as we know, not everything that happens on the internet is positive. It's not always the internet is not always a great place, right? And there are things that happen there that might affect us negatively. There are harms that are present online, and one of that is sexual harassment that might occur, that might be the one consequence of being active in these online dating spaces. And that's why we also invited our Weekly students from the What's the Big Deal FYP project to share with us about the project and what they are finding now. And we have Marissa to share about their project. Marisa?
Thank you, Edson and Dr. Chahal, for sharing such insightful data. Dating apps are the new normal, and it's important to dissect behaviors and try to understand how we as a society can overcome challenges of mobile mediated intimacies and other adversities. So let us begin. Hi all, I am Marissa from What's the Big Deal, or WTBD in short. We are a communications campaign aimed at tackling the currently normalized issue of sexual harassment on dating apps, or SHODA for short. On behalf of my team, I will be taking us through some research insights we found, our goal as a campaign, and how you can help shape the future of dating apps. Now, InCube is doing a marvelous job at pioneering research geared towards dating apps, and especially in a localized context. Leveraging on their research that found an increase in dating app use during COVID-19, perhaps due to the pandemic's social gathering restrictions, and parallel increase in user loneliness and trustworthiness on dating apps, it's paramount that we talk about certain dangers of being on these platforms. We posit from InCube's findings that there may be an increase in risk and/or frequency of SHODA, and it's more important now than ever to speak up about it. Some more context as to why SHODA is becoming more relevant and prevalent in our modern society. So first, dating apps are the in thing, and it's evident by the amount of revenue these apps are generating, crossing the 7 million mark in 2019. Now, with more people seeking romance online, there's a psychological theory that supports bolder, more unruly behaviors online that users would not have otherwise exhibited in real life. Now, the combination of those both may explain the increasing trend of technology-related sexual assault cases that AWARE has uncovered in their research report. Taking all of that into consideration, we did a little digging for ourselves. We conducted in-depth interviews and found that SHODA is actually more common than we thought. And our interviewees found that SHODA SHODA to be normal, almost like a rite of passage, some would say, or something that is bound to happen at some point in time. Another key insight was that there simply wasn't enough information for dating app users to understand what SHODA is and how to react to such instances. We did a pre-campaign survey where we found a fascinating human behavioral insight that users who receive more frequent sexual harassment on apps tend to report the perpetrators less. This negative correlation signals a desensitization and worrisome concern to sexual harassment on dating apps. That would be no less important than that in real life. Other key insights also include that sexualized comments and content are the most frequent forms of SHODA experience, and that SHODA is independent of gender. Now, with all of that in mind, that made our goal fairly simple. We wanted a campaign that creates safer, more positive online dating experience for all. And we wanted to focus on the individual user. So how do we do that? Our campaign has 3 clear pillars of execution: identify, address, and combat. In identify, the main aim is to enable users to, as you may have guessed it, identify or recognize instances of SHODA. Oftentimes, we're not quite clear as to what exactly sexual harassment is on dating apps because there's a fine line between flirting and harassment. And in address, we want to build a community of individuals who are able to interact with one another, either providing support or guidance when encountering SHODA, and most importantly, becoming ambassadors of anti-SHODA. In combat, the idea is to provide app-based, community-centric, and legal resources to users. Along with being a sustained conversation topic, we are intending to share our research-backed collaterals in forms of zines or posters with our venue partners. We believe that no one should ever question one's experience of sexual harassment. It's always a big deal, and it takes a community to share. It takes a community to shape the future of dating. So here's how you can get involved today. First, you can follow our Instagram page for informational content about SHODA, such as how to identify it, find yourself a safe community, protect yourself, and be part of a sustained change in the way we date online. Next, we have a fireside chat with dating app ecosystem partners where we'll explore real-life experiences, how to react to SHODA, and how to protect yourselves from before and during and even after experiencing such situations. I'll pause here for a bit, so do scan these QR codes and connect with us. Now, perhaps you might know someone who is passionate about a topic like this, or this may even be something close to your heart, and we're looking for someone exactly like you. We believe that at the core of societal change is its people. We're constantly on the lookout for key community leaders who will champion WTBD and be proud anti-Shoda ambassadors. Everyone has a voice to champion change. We're also looking for experts in the following areas that will supplement our research further. So once again, on behalf of WTBD's team, let's make it a big deal. Ditch the small talk with us and join the conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Marisa, and thanks to the team. Now we can proceed to your questions. If you have any questions or comments for any of the presentations that we had today, you can raise your hand and I'll call on you, and you can turn on your microphone and your video if you want to, and you can let us know what questions or comments or suggestions you may have, or you can type your questions in the chat. I can see that Dr. Cabanes is having issues with his internet as he predicted earlier. So hopefully he'll be able to join us later and can take some of the questions that you may have. Actually have a question for him. So hopefully he'll be able to join us after. But any questions or comments that you have for Townhouse presentation or for the WTBD group, please let us know. And Sean, if you can also keep an eye on if anyone is raising their hands, just in case I missed any. Any questions in the group? While you are all typing down your questions or trying to figure out your thoughts, and we'd love to hear your thoughts soon. I have a question to the WTBD group, right? So I think one important premise of the study, which I think is very important, is how a lot of the sexual harassment that goes on these online dating spaces get unreported, right? But my question is, did you also look into non-heterosexual interactions and whether you believe that harassment in those interactions might even be more underreported because of the social stigma involved?
Yeah, you brought up definitely an important point to consider, especially now with gender fluidity being the norm as well. I think for our campaign, we are now mainly focusing on a heteronormative we're focusing on a heteronormative stand at the moment, but we also believe that it is a conversation opener for other sexualities to come in and talk about the harassment that they're facing on their individual apps or even on heteronormative apps as well. So I think it is perhaps in the future that we might explore something along those lines.
If I may just add on to what Marisa said, for non-heteronormative apps, there are certain features that kind of make the lines blur. For example, Grindr, from our in-depth interview, we found out there's an option to select if they do want to receive dick pics or not. So some of the interviewees that we talked to said that that was not being followed, or people did not even follow it. So we feel that when we do target that, there needs to be more in-depth investigation of how the app actually works before we can extend our research findings to that.
Yeah. So there's also, the specific affordances of these particular dating applications also have a role to play, right? In what kinds of behavior are allowed or are even encouraged in these spaces. We have a question from one of our graduate students, Ting Ting. Do you want to turn your microphone and your video, and if you want to ask your question directly? Ting Ting?
Hello. Can you hear me, Prof?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm interested in Dr. Zhang Hao's study because I see that a lot of married people also use the dating app. So I'm curious, what are the main purposes of using dating app? And I suppose that different ages have different purposes. So I would like to hear Dr. Zhang Hao's sharing. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Ting Ting, for your question. Okay. So, okay. Actually, when we conduct the study, we our focus is actually not on the dating app, but on other research purposes. But to actually answer your question, I would think that um, I mean maybe it is due to COVID-19, and people get isolated in their own homes, or actually due to social distancing, people can't actually socialize with one another. So they actually have feelings of isolation, and maybe they want to actually have companionship. Uh, so that's why they actually turn to dating apps to maybe perhaps the reason is not to actually date, but actually to have have a listening ear or something. Yeah. And also I think also given today's technology, uh, nowadays everyone is using smartphones in Singapore, and then I think it's a assessing dating apps is actually quite it's quite an easy thing to do for someone who is technologically savvy. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but
Thank you,
Ting
Dr.
Ting, that's an interesting question. I mean, when we added the dating app item in our questionnaire, it was more exploratory. We were mapping out different ways of using the internet. But you are right, for different types of people, the motivation, right, to use dating apps may be different, and it's something that we should be looking more closely in the future. So thanks, Ting Ting, for your
Yes,
question.
thank you, Prof. Maybe the purpose of talking to anonymous people, strangers, are different than
Mm,
talking with Facebook friends. So maybe doing some interview
yeah.
in the future might be helpful.
Yep. I don't use dating apps, but I also know of other apps where there is an app where, and I just see it on YouTube, where you enter a, like, you interact with people, and you don't know who you're gonna get next, right? I forgot what the name of that app is.
Omigo?
Yes, yes, it sounds like that. Yeah, where so I've seen YouTube videos where they just compile their different interactions, right? So I guess, yeah, what thinking is saying, right, is your sometimes there's a type of um gratification fulfilled, like, or need that's fulfilled by interacting with a complete stranger, than when you interact with someone you're very familiar with. So yeah, I mean, I think there's something really in there, that we should continue doing research about. I can see that Dr. Cabanes has successfully rejoined our group. I have just one question for you, Jace. Based on the field work that you've done, right, and I would guess this field work might still be ongoing, right? Do you think that this level of mediated intimacy will be the new normal, like even after COVID? We will see the same extent of the use of technologies to facilitate different types of intimacies, or do you see as reverting back, like an elastic band, just reverting back to face-to-face interactions after the pandemic?
Yeah, you're right that in many ways the research we're doing on intimacies in the pandemic is just really we're in the thick of it. When we first thought of local intimacies, it was before the pandemic, and so we're trying to use this lens to understand what's going on at the moment. And it seems to us, at least, where we are. Maybe this will change when our field work has, uh, when we completed our field work. But seems like before the pandemic, people were wary, and I mentioned this earlier, people were wary about to what extent will these online relationships supplant our everyday relationships, right? Are they going to make us less human? Would be the common moral panic around mobile mediated intimacies. But I think what the pandemic has shown us, or is showing us right now, is that these mobile mediated relationships really cannot replace the kind of face-to-face human interactions that we have. And in some ways, the pandemic has allowed us to push these kinds of mobile relationships to the very limits. We see what it could mean if this was the only kind of relationship we have, right? Like currently now in Manila, in the workplace, we still don't see each other. It's all purely like this. So we now know what the extent is of if you live a life that's fully online, if you have relationships that's fully online. And because of that, I think the fear about this will decrease. But what will happen is not a return to the normal, I think. It'll be more like, so now we know the place of these technologies in our lives, what they can do, what they cannot do. I think it's clearer to us now that we've seen a life that's purely online, and many of us might not want that. So we just say, we'll use it for these bits of our lives, but not with the others. But yeah, that's the sense that I have for now.
Okay. Thanks, Jace. We have another question for you from Swati. She's saying in the chat that she's having issues with her audio. That's why she's typing out the question. So the question is, COVID has led to increased mobile mediated intimacies. Local intimacies would have pre-existed pre-COVID also. Could you elaborate on how the pandemic shaped the nature of these global intimacies?
Yeah, I think what the pandemic has done, related to my answer earlier, is to amplify our reliance on local intimacy. So it's on mobile media, and so it's also heightened our experience of local intimacies. And I think that's the main thing that the pandemic has done, is really amplify the centrality of this experience for many of us. But what it has also revealed is that now we know which people are completely dependent on mobile media, and what are the social factors that shape that, and which people are less dependent on these mobile mediated technologies, even during the pandemic, because they have other means of sustaining their connections. Just to briefly speak of the concrete, and I mentioned this earlier in the talk as well, the upper classes in the Philippines have ways to subvert the lockdowns. And so we get to see how mobile media relationships, I think the pandemic has shown very clearly the divides that exist in the everyday, and how they are magnified by the divides online, and put together how they further magnify the many divides we have in society. And that's what's it allowed us to see. Because of our greater reliance on mobile media, we also see how these mobile media are connected to issues of race, class, gender, sexuality, and all the inequalities around that.
Thanks, Jace. This would be another question for the panel, or maybe anyone who is in the room who can answer this. I'm curious, for someone like me who has never used these online dating apps, or maybe I will start using it after this session. But is it always the goal of those who use this to then meet in person? Meaning, is the mediated form just a way to then have in-person interaction? Or do you think some people go into these mediated spaces and intend to keep it within these spaces? I'm just, out of curiosity. Or anyone who's, anyone in the group who wants to answer. You don't have to say that you're using these apps if you don't want to let us know. But I feel like there's also... Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's me, TJ. Yeah.
Yes.
I have never used dating app because I don't need to. Okay, I've been married for 7 years. Okay, but my direct answer, because I think I saw on some reviews of various apps on some blogs or things like that, right? So they actually analyze app by app and say the suitability, describe the suitability of the app for different kinds of different groups of people looking for companionship. If certain apps have like very clear goals. If you go in only if you have clear goals, look for marriage, look for a relationship, look for a casual relationship and things like that. So I think an indirect answer to your question is depending on what a person's relationship goals are, they will go to the different app, and then whether they maintain the relationship just online or to progress, they progress to meet offline, is really depending on the app that they use and the kind of relationship they themselves are looking for. Yeah, so different apps, it really differs.
Yeah. So these different apps, I guess they're also designed in different ways and then
Yes.
facilitate the different, I guess, help facilitate the different outcomes.
Yes, that's right.
Ah,
A very recent article that I saw. Let me see whether I can find.
yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let
Yeah.
me go back to the WTBD group. Would you say that? I mean, I'm just thinking that your project is built around the premise, which I agree with, that in a way, all these harms, sexual assaults and harassment are being normalized, right? Not only in from the perspective of those who perpetrate this, but those who also experience it. They feel like they've come to accept these incidents as part of an online dating experience, which you're right, they shouldn't accept that. But do you also feel like this also comes from the perception that online dating is still, there's still some stigma in it, right? It's not as normalized as we would expect it to be. And there have been many successful outcomes from these spaces, right? That resulted in long lasting quality relationships, but there is still some work to be done to for societies to accept that this is a normal way of meeting people. What does your group think?
Yeah, for sure. So we were talking to Tinder, and Tinder was just sharing how they take very different approaches depending on the countries, because each country would have their own very niche, very nuanced culture, right? So, for example, in Indonesia, so a very conservative country, almost similar to Philippines in a certain sense, that Tinder is actually not a dating app; it's a app to find friends. Yeah, so it was fascinating for us to find that out, because actually in the US it's very known that it's an app that I can go on to look for sexual activities, right, with anyone who just so happens to be on the app, and it's a common notion. But here in Singapore, we also lean sometimes to the conservative side, and we were wondering as well when we first started researching whether it's something that we have taken from the US, like yeah, okay, we'll use Tinder and then we will find someone to have sex with, right? But we realized that actually, for at least for our respondents and the in-depth interviewees, they don't really feel that way. It's still very much to look for a conversation, a connection, and that's why Bumble, Hinge, a lot of the newer apps are focusing on that. And even our localized apps like Copy Date, Aphrodite Project, those are very centered upon that connection, that human connection that you eventually make with someone. So I guess bringing it back to it's really about the culture that the app is situated in. So the apps are quite smart themselves. They market themselves very differently in different markets, and then the way that we use it changes as well.
Oh yeah, I think that's consistent with the work that Jason and his team has been doing. I think this the idea of glocal
Exactly.
is very much in line with this, right? That you might have a global platform, but its use in a certain context is determined by local context. Interesting. Do we have any more questions from the group before we close our first webinar? If not, Sean is going to help us share his screen so you can have access to the email addresses, the contact details of Dr. Cabanes, of the WTBD project, and of course of InCube. If you have questions that you're maybe too shy to ask during this webinar, you can let them know via their email. If you have ideas on things that you want to collaborate with InCube or learn more about the research that we do, please email us at incube@ntu.edu.sg, or reach out to, or you come visit us at level 2 here in the Weekend We School. The WTBD group will have their main event in a few weeks, so also keep an eye on that. And of course, if you're interested in Jason's new book, or have questions about his project, please let him know via his email as well. InCube is hoping to organize monthly webinars, and our next webinar will be in a few weeks' time. It will be co-organized with Dr. Gerard Kagin and Dr. Ang Peng Hua. We have an interesting topic where we're bringing in another excellent speaker to talk about elections in the US and misinformation, and how do we prepare communities for that. So I hope you also stay tuned for our next webinar. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Hope you had a great lunch while listening to our presentations. And now it's time for our presenters to also have their lunch. So thank you very much. Good afternoon, and stay healthy, everyone. Take care. Bye-bye.